Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is your girl, Wicked Raider 22, coming with a topic that has actually been on my mind for a while. I am in my other free-to-play accounts, but there are two buffs or debuffs that I definitely wanted to bring to your attention and kind of share some thoughts because these are two that I myself have struggled with. So on this particular account that I started with April, I have the legendary champion Holstering. And Holstering, y'all, gets a lot of smack back and forth. I've done a video on him before, just reviewing him as a champion. He is a champion that honestly I enjoy having on my account, but I know it comes down a lot of times to where you are in the game and also your expectations as you are building teams. So for me, it's been a pretty good fit. As you guys can see on this particular account, I have definitely been sticking to the rules of keeping my champion list as small as possible, but I'm also trying to branch out and use champions that I haven't used on other accounts before. What I did want to do was kind of take a look at skill sets. And in this video, the two debuffs that stick out the most to me, that have been most confusing to me, have probably been Vex and what's the other one? What's the other one? I am stuck between Vex and Veil or Perfect Veil because you'll see it in both ways. Holstring is a champion on his second attack overthrow, where you come in with this skill and you run into Hex. So for this particular champion, he attacks 3 times at random, will ignore 25% of defense against targets under Hex debuffs, will ignore a further 25% of defense against targets under Hex debuffs from the Banner Lords or Knights Revenant factions. This is an attack-based champion. This particular skill set can be brought down to a 3-turn cooldown. And what I was looking at when I was going through what is the benefit of Hex, when you think about it, Hex will be one of those buffs that actually doesn't directly do anything. And I think that's kind of what we forget. It creates a situation where you can have a champion that is able to perform a little bit better. So it creates those conditionals. For example, and I'm just thinking overall, guys, when I'm thinking about battles that I've been involved, Hex is really unique because it's fairly new, one of the newer skill sets added to the game. It does require 2 different champions that use Hex debuff to apply different effects. So you have to stop and ask yourself, especially when you are early game, is it worth going in and using 2 of your slots on your team, because both of those champions have to have Hex ability in order for you to be able to really get anything out of it. There have not been a lot of champions in Raid Shadow Legends that have that effect, but it interacts with some champions to enable powerful features or additions to champion skills, such as Rule, who will attack Hex targets twice. So there are some champions where if you have 2 champions on your team with Hex ability, they will be able to attack more often. They're also able to do more damage. You will see a lot of this on your higher level nukers, for example. I've seen where you will have teams that are built specifically around those champions. Now, if you're thinking about areas like, oh, let's just say you're in dungeon, for example. If I've made it to higher level dungeons, this could be helpful. Not necessarily an arena because, depending on who you're working with, it may not be worth it to allot 2 particular slots just for this. Now, for Holstring, he's one that actually has a Hex debuff. He's able to ignore, for example, that 25% defense against targets under a Hex debuff. So if you have another champion that's throwing out the Hex as well, he's able to ignore a certain amount of their defense to provide more damage being dealt. It is not always the first thing on my mind. For this particular champion, the one thing I like about him is I like Witchfinder. It is my number 1 skill for this particular champion, but it also combines that other skill that I was talking about to you guys earlier, the one that I was kind of struggling with. And it was coming down to what's the difference between a veil and a perfect veil. So Host Ring has perfect veil. So for any champion that has this particular buff, according to Raid, he will be hidden from being targeted even after damaging an enemy. It can be targeted if it's only remaining champion in the team or if all champions in the team have veil buffs. It decreases incoming damage from the AoE skills by 15%. So the thing is, Perfect Veil allows you to avoid those multi-attackers. And that's kind of what you're thinking about. If you look at the skill overall, Witchfinder is a really concrete skill, even though it's on that 4-turn cooldown, which is one of the things that actually holds it back. But it attacks 4 times at random. Each hit has a 75% chance of placing a Hex debuff for 3 turns. So keep in mind, every time you have those 2 champions that have Hex abilities, you may have a Hex buffer and a Hex debuffer. They are going to be working in synergy with each other to increase damage. And of course, he is conditional. So his will apply to champions from the Banner Lord and Knights Revenant factions cannot resist this debuff. Each hit also has a 75% chance of stealing 25% of the target's turn meter, steals 50% of the turn meter instead if the target is from the Banner Lord or Knight Revenant factions. Very specific on where you should probably be using this champion. If this champion's turn meter is at 75% or more after the steal, it places a perfect veil buff on this champion. So it provides him that additional protection while he's still able to continue to attack. Now, the biggest difference between veil and perfect veil. In perfect veil, you're going to have that increase of 15% for those AoE skills. With veil, it's only 7.5%. So you're still getting majority of the same action, just at a weaker version of the same attack. Hex and Veil are those 2 abilities, those 2 add-ons for skills that I consider most of the time to be mid to maybe end game important. The number one reason, and I will say this over and over again, because I've had so many comments on Host Ring and just about as many comments, honestly, on Painkeeper. I get a lot of people that are very, very hesitant of these champions or avoid them altogether. Guys, it comes down to when you pull them in the game. Host Ring was my first legendary on this account. And I'll say that again, very first legendary. And I don't know about you guys, but when you were going through early campaign, for example, pulling a legendary at that point, whoever you're going to pull, you are likely going to build that champion out. And it's not because they're the best champion for you. It's not because, oh, those resources probably cannot be used in a different fashion. It's because you've already pulled them. And that's just being honest. You pull that champion, it's really early. You're trying to go in and really push through, and you're going to use them. And I recommend that if you have the resources and especially the time, if you are all about progression on your account, build that champion out and use them until you acquire better. Now, here's another champion that I recently did a video on as well. It's Life Taker. And Life Taker stood out to me for the same reason. I believe on Life Taker, the 3rd account, she has Diamond Body, places a veil buff on this champion for 1 turn and a 30% reflect damage buff on this champion for 2 turns. It's not always going to be the perfect scenario. Is Life Taker the strongest rare that I have? Absolutely not. Can she be extremely helpful in some areas of the game? The answer is yes. Having a combination of a Veil and Perfect Veil champion on the same team, depending on what dungeon you're in, depending on what area of the game you're in, can also be important as well. I believe, honestly, they're going to start adding more Hex and Veil champions to the game. I can definitely see the direction of it because the goal is it forces you to bring in more than one champion that has a comparable skill set. So it allows teams to be built now around those 2 pillars. It also forces you to build out those 2 champions because you don't want to have a champion that's 6-star and one that is only a 2 or a 3-star because you want to get the biggest bang for your buck. Normally, these champions will also, for their particular accounts, likely be the highest nukers. So the question is, where do you pick? It will always come down to availability of resources, the amount of time as a free to play player you are willing to put in, and it also comes down to the available gear. As you guys can see, the number one limitation still, even on this particular account, where I believe we are, let's check our progression real quick. Nope, daily login is where I want to go. This particular account, we have yet to get to High Katoon. I am trying to get to her. All of my other accounts have this particular champion. She is a really good champion. She's one that you definitely would like to at least 5-star, if not 6-star her out. I think I 5-starred her on every account just about that I've had her on. And I'll be honest, I've gone so far from keeping her for every account to using her as food. I highly recommend you do not use this champion as food. Okay, don't do it. I've done it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. So High Katoon is going to be one of those that you can keep. She has a skill set that does scale and build really, really well early to early mid game at least. It's just one of those areas where you're looking at how will my team develop? What will this next step do for my particular team? If you are keeping all of your top tier champions at this point and you're trying to build all of them out, guys, free to play, your limitation will come down to your time, your silver, and your gems. Those resources, especially when you don't have access to certain books, you have to be extremely mindful of how much do I really, really want to pour into this champion. So let me know. How do you guys feel about Hex? How do you feel about Veil and Perfect Veil? Do you use champions that contain these type of skills? Have you seen them truly benefit your team? Or are you just using that champion in solo mode and just kind of pushing through with whatever damage they're able to produce? I would definitely love to hear from you. Oh, updates. Here's one more thing before I let you go. If you haven't seen the video, don't forget, guys, I have signed this particular champion up as well. I created my own clan. So 22WK, Wicked Raider 22. We have our own little clan. We're getting in there, getting started. Would love to add a few more members so that we can qualify for the upcoming clan versus clan events. We are active, definitely pushing through some challenges at the moment, but would love for you guys to send out an invitation and join the fun. Would love to see that one. If you stuck around this long, don't forget to subscribe. We're putting out content every Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Always thinking about the beginning and especially that mid-game kind of play, enjoying Raid Shadow Legends at this point. And hopefully you guys will go along with me for the ride. I will talk to you soon.